30 miles west of Houston, the city of Fulshear, Texas, is growing rapidly. Heavy construction equipment runs daily to build new housing developments. The local population is shifting quickly. In fact, Fulshear consistently ranks as one of the fastest-growing cities in the United States. But as bulldozers clear land for new subdivisions, the original character of the town is often the first thing to be displaced. Thousands of new residents unpack their boxes here every month. Most arrive with little to no connection to the history of the land they are building their lives upon. Seeing this change, a group of locals formed the Fulshear Historical Association in 2020. They realized that without a dedicated effort, the town's collective memory was at risk of fading. The association's work is essentially a race against the clock to collect historical documents, archive vintage photographs, and record oral histories before the remaining physical links to the town's origins are lost for good. The association is governed entirely by volunteers. They rely on retired professionals who apply their career experience to building an organization capable of managing the town's heritage. Bob Gordon is one of those volunteers. He stepped into the role of Director of Development to help stabilize the organization's growth and fundraising efforts. Before this, Gordon spent 40 years as a naval architect and ocean engineer, working in the offshore oil and gas industry. Now, he applies that technical mindset to historical preservation. He uses his experience in project management and networking to organize the logistics of saving local history. One of his primary tools is a digital newsletter and website called About Fulshear, Texas. Through this platform, he reaches out to new residents to share stories of the town's past. This outreach generates sponsorships that help fund the association's operations, creating a cycle where community interest directly supports local preservation. By treating historical memory as a project that requires a solid framework, volunteers like Gordon help keep the town's heritage from being forgotten. The stories the association uncovers through their Shaping Fulshear exhibit show a community with deep and varied roots. This record begins with the Fulshear land grant and its connection to Stephen F. Austin's Old 300 colony in the early 1800s. The association works to include a wide range of experiences, documenting the realities of early agrarian life, slavery, and the generations involved in local sharecropping. The timeline also captures the impact of the railroad, which brought a wave of development and commerce to the town's early saloons. Preservation involves physical labor too, from archiving fragile maps to working with community groups to restore and document local cemeteries. By archiving these varied layers of Fulshear's history, the association ensures that a detailed record of the town remains accessible to future generations, even as the landscape changes. For the thousands of people moving to Fulshear today, these exhibits and digital resources provide a way to connect with their new home. Rapid modernization and historical preservation can work in tandem. A growing city gains a sense of place when its residents understand the people and events that shaped the land before they arrived. You can explore the history of your own community by seeking out local archives, subscribing to neighborhood history projects, or supporting your local historical society. Preserving these records provides a sense of continuity, ensuring that as Fulshear moves forward, it carries its unique local identity along with it.
So think about building an offshore oil rig for a second.
All right.
You're out there manipulating thousands of tons of steel, right? In the middle of this totally hostile, volatile ocean.
Right. It's an exercise in extreme physics and fluid dynamics.
Exactly. Just ruthless structural integrity. But then on the totally opposite end of the spectrum, think about archiving the history of a 19th century Texas town.
Which is very different.
Right. You're delicately cataloging paper land grants, handling fragile photographs before they literally disintegrate into dust.
Yeah, totally different worlds.
But today, we're looking at a stack of source documents that prove, surprisingly enough, you actually need the exact same kind of brain to do both.
It's wild, right? Because it sounds completely contradictory at first.
Yeah.
Like one discipline is all about conquering the physical elements to, extract future resources. And the other is about safeguarding these super fragile, intangible memories of a community's past. And this is the crazy part. When you look closely at the mechanics of preservation, the parallels are undeniable.
And that is the exact mission of this deep dive. Okay, let's unpack this. We are examining this really fascinating set of documents surrounding the Fulshear Historical Association,
Right.
or the FHA as we'll call them. And specifically, we're looking at their director of development, a man named Bob Gordon.
Which is a great story.
It really is. Our goal here for you, the listener, is to figure out how one of America's absolute fastest growing cities is fighting to remember its roots, before they are just literally paved over.
And that fight is happening right now, like in real time. For you listening, if you aren't familiar with Fulshear, Texas, it sits in Fort Bend County, just a bit west of Houston.
And it is booming.
Exploding is more like it. I mean, the demographic and geographic shifts are happening at this blistering pace. It consistently ranks among the fastest growing areas in the entire United States.
So if you live in Fulshear right now, watching all this rapid development happen around you, it has to feel like your computer is downloading this massive, hyper-fast software update.
That's a great way to put it.
But at the exact same time, you are just desperately trying to read the original handwritten source code of the town.
Right. Before the screen refreshes and it's just gone forever. What's fascinating here is the visual and cultural friction. It is profound.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you have this bustling modern cityscape, right? New housing subdivisions stretching for miles, freshly expanded roads, commercial centers that seem to pop up overnight.
Yeah, totally.
But underneath all of that modern concrete, there is this sepia-toned 19th century railroad and agricultural town. Fulshear's origins are actually tied directly to Stephen F. Austin's Old 300 colony.
Yes, wait, I want to pause on the Old 300 for just a second.
Sure.
Because that term carries massive weight. For those of you listening who might not be, steeped in Texas lore, the Old 300 refers to the original 300 families who received land grants from Stephen F. Austin.
Back in the 1820s, right?
Exactly. To settle the territory. This isn't just local trivia. This is the literal bedrock of modern Texas history. And Churchill Fulshear Sr. was one of those original settlers.
Wow. Which means the history buried under those new subdivisions is deeply foundational.
Yeah.
So you have this inherent tension. When a rapidly modernizing area brings in thousands of new residents who, have absolutely no connection to that, past the area risks burying its heritage under all these new foundations.
The new code overwrites the old code.
Exactly. If an organization doesn't intentionally hit save on that original data, it just vanishes without a trace.
And that right there is the exact gap the Fulshear Historical Association was created to fill.
Right.
The sources show this organization was actually founded quite recently, in 2020. It's a registered 501c3 nonprofit.
Okay.
And their stated mission is to collect, preserve, and promote the diverse history and heritage of Fulshear. And, to inspire future generations through education and community services.
That 2020 founding date is such a critical detail, though.
How so?
Well, we just established that this city is booming at a historic rate, right?
Yeah, totally.
To establish a historical society, precisely when the town's physical landscape is changing the most drastically, that is a calculated race against time.
Oh, I see what you mean.
The founders clearly recognized that their window to capture these oral histories and preserve these physical sites, it was closing rapidly.
Yeah, and you can really see their reverence for those early days right in their branding. Like the FHA logo specifically incorporates elements like railways, horse ranching, and farming.
Nice.
It's this very direct visual nod to the early industries that built the town, long before the first suburban cul-de-sac was ever even drawn up.
Right.
And they list their core values as partnership, stewardship, and inclusivity.
And what really stands out about their approach, and the sources highlight this, is that they are actively avoiding the classic museum trap.
The dusty archives, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A historical association can very easily just be a static vault, just, hoarding artifacts in a back room where nobody ever actually sees them.
Yeah, like a private collection or something.
Right. But the FHA's mandate really emphasizes making their collections accessible. And they are aggressively educating the public, especially integrating into local schools.
Which is huge.
Because they understand that preserving history is basically useless if the active breathing community can't interact with it.
Which naturally brings us to the logistics of actually pulling all this off.
Yeah.
Because preserving a booming town's history requires intense vision, consistent funding, and just serious organizational infrastructure.
Takes a little work.
It really does. And when you read the sources and see the title Director of Development for a Historical Society, a very specific image comes to mind, right?
Oh, definitely.
You picture a lifelong archivist, someone sitting in a basement surrounded by magnifying glasses, carefully turning crumbling parchment with white cotton gloves.
Yeah, that is absolutely the default profile most people would assume.
But the Director of Development for the FHA is Bob Gordon. And as we mentioned at the very top of the deep dive, Bob Gordon is a retired naval architect.
And an ocean engineer.
Yes. The documents tell us he holds a degree from the University of Rhode Island. And he spent over 4 decades working in the offshore oil and gas industry.
It is a phenomenal pivot.
Wait, stop. I have to challenge this right here because it feels completely disconnected to me.
How so?
Well, designing a 50,000-ton steel rig in the Gulf of Mexico is about advanced calculus, right? It's fluid dynamics, it's mitigating physical disaster.
Sure.
But preserving 19th century paper is about delicate archiving. It's about community nostalgia. I am really struggling to see how a guy who spent 40 years wrestling with the open ocean doesn't just treat the town's history like a cold, rigid spreadsheet. Like, how does that translate?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it actually translates perfectly. You just have to look at the unseen mechanics of running a nonprofit.
Okay, lay it out for me.
Let's break down what an ocean engineer actually does. Designing an offshore rig isn't just about bending steel. It is about calculating how a massive structure is going to withstand extreme, unpredictable forces over decades.
Right.
To build it, you have to break down a multi-billion-dollar project into thousands of sequenced phases. You manage hundreds of contractors. You have to secure funding for each phase before moving to the next.
Oh. Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Now look at the challenge of building a grassroots 501c3 from scratch in a rapidly changing environment.
Yeah.
You have to secure initial funding. You have to navigate complex federal tax laws. You're coordinating a board of directors, managing volunteer stakeholders.
Right. Yeah.
You have to build an archival system that won't just disintegrate under its own weight.
Yeah.
The raw materials are totally different. Grants and artifacts instead of steel and concrete. But the project management matrix is identical.
Wow.
Gordon is essentially building the load-bearing pilings of this historical society.
That makes a ton of sense. So he isn't curating the exhibits himself, necessarily. He's engineering the organizational capacity so the exhibits can actually exist.
Exactly.
The sources say he's serving a term from May 2024 through 2027, and his specific role really focuses on fundraising, securing grants, networking, and just supporting the organization's overall growth.
And he brings this really crucial element that, say, a corporate outsider wouldn't have, which is deep community roots.
Right, he lives there.
He does. He isn't just parachuting in to apply management principles. The sources highlight that he's a resident of the Weston Lakes community right there in Fulshear.
Okay.
He's a former teacher associated with Texas A&M. He is deeply involved with Union Chapel, where he's actually led church capital campaigns. And he's an active member of the Brazos River Rotary.
And he actually uses that Rotary platform to speak regularly, right? Like bringing local history to life for the business community.
Yes, exactly.
So he is literally taking 4 decades of high-level project management and seamlessly fusing it with his retirement focus on his own neighborhood. That's incredible.
It really is. So let's look at the output of all this structural work. Because the engine Gordon is helping to build is producing some incredibly nuanced historical curation.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when a town is growing fast and developers are coming in trying to sell a certain, lifestyle, there is this massive temptation to sanitize the local history.
Oh, totally. Just paint a pretty picture.
Right. Just put up a bronze plaque about a nice farmer, ignore all the complicated stuff, and create a highlight reel. But the FHA isn't doing that at all.
No, they are really leaning into their stated core value of inclusivity. Because to preserve a town's history accurately, you have to look at the entire tapestry.
Yeah. And the centerpiece of this effort is their flagship bicentennial exhibit. It's titled Shaping Fulshear: Historic Influences on a Western Landscape.
It's hosted at the Fort Bend County Library's Fulshear branch, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And the scope of it is just vast. They start at the very beginning with the Fulshear land grant and the founders Churchill Fulshear Sr. and Jr., really rooting the narrative in that old 300 legacy we talked about.
But then they track the evolution through the agrarian life. And crucially, They do not look away from the painful realities.
No, they don't. The exhibit explicitly covers the history of slavery and sharecropping in the area.
Which is so important.
It is. And then it moves into the industrial shifts, documenting the massive impact of the San Antonio and Aransas Pass Railroad coming through the region.
And the inclusion of the railroad is where we really see the economic mechanics of the 19th century at play.
What do you mean?
Well, think about how a local economy functioned back then. The railroad was essentially the circulatory system. If the track bypassed your town, your economic oxygen was immediately cut off.
Right, which perfectly explains another segment of their exhibit, the decline of a nearby settlement called Pittsville.
Yes.
The FHA deliberately documents how Pittsville basically just became a ghost town.
Showcasing Pittsville is such a brilliant piece of curation.
Why does that stand out to you?
Because it proves that survival isn't guaranteed. A community can simply vanish if the economic winds shift like a railroad bypassing it, or if it loses its structural foundation.
Wow, yeah.
By putting the story of a ghost town right next to the story of Fulshear's current boom, the FHA is sending this subtle but incredibly powerful message about the fragility of progress.
That's a great point.
It honors the real people who built the area. It ensures the whole story is told, regardless of whether it ended in a boom or a bust.
And Bob Gordon is also personally contributing to this tapestry of stories in a very modern way. He runs a Substack newsletter and a website called About Fulshear, Texas.
Which is such a cool initiative.
It is. The sources mention he writes about the gritty realities, early saloons, devastating town fires, but he also does these deep dives into the evolution of Black churches in the area and how the town's demographics have shifted over time.
Using a Substack for 19th century history is a highly strategic move, honestly.
You think so? Oh, definitely. Think about all those thousands of new residents moving into the new housing developments. They are not going to organically wander into a local archive on a random Tuesday afternoon,
Right, they're busy commuting.
Exactly. You have to push the history to them. Delivering well-researched, gritty historical narratives directly to their smartphones, it meets the modern audience exactly where they are.
And he leverages it brilliantly. The documents show that the proceeds from the sponsorships on his Substack go directly to support the FHA.
That's smart funding.
And he is incredibly accessible, too. He actively invites the community to reach out and share their own family stories. If you want to connect with him, you can reach him at bob.gordon@fulsharehistory.org, or you could even call him at 832-803-8363.
Wow, putting his actual number out there.
Yeah, he really wants to hear from people.
This raises an important question, though, about how local culture actually survives.
Okay, what is it? We all have this romantic vision of historical societies driven purely by, community passion and nostalgia. Right?
Sure, bake sales and volunteers.
Exactly. But passion alone does not pay for archival digitization. Nostalgia does not secure physical exhibit space in a county library system.
No, it requires corporate-level governance to stay afloat. And when you look at the FHA's volunteer board of directors, they have built an incredibly powerful engine to drive this mission.
Absolutely.
We already know they have a naval architect handling development, but the president of the board is Madeline Calco-Corcia, and she brings extensive museum and nonprofit executive experience, specifically in Texas history leadership.
So she provides the specialized industry knowledge. She knows exactly how an archive should function, how exhibits should flow, and what standards really must be met to be taken seriously in the preservation world.
And then you have their treasurer, Jeff Murphy. He is a CPA with a deep background in corporate finance.
And here is where the mechanics of grassroots funding really come into play. A local nonprofit doesn't just, ask for a grant and automatically receive a check.
Right.
Major philanthropic organizations require exhaustive proof of financial viability. They want to see 5-year financial projections. They want risk mitigation strategies, perfectly auditable records.
It's basically a corporate pitch.
It is. So having a CPA with corporate finance experience ensures the FHA's money is managed with the absolute regulatory compliance required to win those big funds.
It is a literal masterclass in community organizing. You have a museum executive setting the historical vision, a CPA ensuring the financial compliance, and a former offshore engineer utilizing his project management skills to secure the funding.
It's a powerhouse team.
They have essentially built a corporate-grade C-suite just to protect a small town's history.
And that structure allows them to execute highly complex operations. They have directors dedicated specifically to preservation and archives. to cultural heritage and to digital curation. This board structure is the reason they're able to manage a digital collection hub and actively digitize historical materials rather than just, talking about it at monthly meetings.
But they are also getting their hands dirty out in the field. The sources highlight their work preserving local cemeteries through community projects, specifically coordinating with Eagle Scout initiatives.
That is multi-layered impact right there.
Yeah.
By coordinating with Eagle Scouts, they achieve the physical preservation of a cemetery, obviously.
Yeah.
But they simultaneously fulfill their goal of educating the youth and deeply integrating that next generation into the town's heritage.
And because of that rigorous C-suite structure you mentioned, they actually have the credibility to secure serious backing.
Oh, they do.
The documents note they've received funding from major groups like the Albert and Ethel Hertzstein Charitable Foundation. And again, foundations like that do not give money to unorganized groups just because they have good intentions.
No, they fund viable, sustainable operations, which should really make anyone listening think differently about the local organizations in their own towns.
How so?
Well, whether it's a historical society or a local arts council, a neighborhood association, we tend to only see the public events they host, right?
Yeah, the fun stuff.
We rarely consider the hidden professional expertise driving them. There are retired engineers, accountants, and executives in nearly every community, just quietly translating a lifetime of high-level corporate skills into the preservation of local culture.
And the FHA makes it totally seamless to support that work. They have a highly active digital presence. If you search for the Fulshear Historical Association online, their website, which is fulshearhistoricalassociation.org, is a massive hub for exhibits, events, and archival resources.
Which is so critical today.
It is. They're highly active on social platforms, too. Facebook and Instagram at Fulshear History. They keep the community engaged daily. They sell merchandise like T-shirts to raise funds.
Nice.
And, of course, they manage direct donations. Or you can even send them mail at P.O. Box 368, Fulshear, Texas, 77441.
Basically, to preserve the realities of the 19th century, they have completely mastered the tools of the 21st century.
We have spent this deep dive covering a lot of ground today. From Stephen F. Austin's original land grants and the decline of railroad ghost towns, to offshore oil engineers and the strict tax codes of nonprofit funding.
It's quite the journey.
But I really want to bring this right to your doorstep, wherever you happen to be listening from today. So what does this all mean? Think about your own city. Tomorrow, when you are driving past a brand new housing development, or maybe sitting in traffic where they're expanding a commercial center, take a second to look at the ground.
Yeah, really look at it.
Wonder to yourself, what history is buried right underneath your tires? What old economic lifelines, what forgotten ghost towns, or what original founders walked exactly where you are sitting right now?
It shifts your entire perspective on the physical space around you.
Yeah.
And, it leads to a really fascinating and somewhat unsettling thought about the future. Yeah. Think about it. The Fulshear Historical Association is working incredibly hard today to digitize physical artifacts from the 1800s.
Right.
They are scanning paper land grants, preserving handwritten letters, and protecting physical photographs. But if we project ourselves into the future, how will the historical associations of the year 2200 preserve the history we are making right now?
Oh, wow. That is an incredible question.
Because we live almost entirely digitally now, will a digital Substack newsletter, like the one Bob Gordon is writing today, be treated with the same archival reverence by future historians?
I mean, will they even be able to find it?
Exactly. Will a server full of emails or a cloud database be as difficult to unearth, authenticate, and preserve as a 19th century paper document? The role of a digital curation director isn't just about scanning old paper anymore.
No.
It might soon be about figuring out how to stop our current digital lives from simply evaporating when the servers shut down. The nature of historical preservation itself is just fundamentally changing.
It really makes the tangible, physical work of the FHA feel even more grounded. Just knowing that the artifacts of our own lives right now are basically just invisible ones and zeros.
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Whether you spend your days building the future like an ocean engineer or curating the past, we hope this conversation encourages you to look a little closer at the invisible foundations of your own community.
Always stay curious.
Because sometimes the structural integrity of a town's future depends entirely on whether someone with the right blueprint remembered to hit save on its past.